The United States Congress just passed rules for impeaching President Donald Trump. The scene that played out today on the House floor is serious, severe, and historically unusual. Only 3 presidents have ever faced this kind of impeachment probe vote before. Only 2 have actually been impeached. Only one of them was an elected president. So what Congress did today is rare by any measure. It forever marks Donald Trump's presidency and scores a clear win for Speaker Pelosi, who had been cautious about impeachment at every step of this debate, holding back her more spirited colleagues initially, lining up the evidence, and first uniting her entire caucus before stepping out to preside over this vote and even casting her own vote, which is rare for a sitting speaker.
The resolution is adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
That is not rhetoric. That's not symbolism. And it's not another verbal rebuke of this president who has been so famously and constantly rebuked. No, what you just heard, those words from the speaker on the passage of this resolution, is power. This is the exercise of the constitutional power by the party that won the midterms, creating now, tonight, for the first time, a set of public rules for probing whether Donald Trump abused his foreign policy powers. And this Congress is showing the nation that tonight they are closer to impeaching President Trump than this Congress has ever been since he took office. Pelosi and her impeachment leadership team laying out the reasons for that today.
What is at stake is our democracy.
It's about betrayal. It's about corruption. It's about national security. It's about the undermining of our elections. It's about defending our democracy for the people.
The House and the American public must see all the evidence for themselves.
Maybe the most important service as members of Congress we will ever pay to the country and Constitution.
I don't know why the Republicans are afraid of the truth. Every member should support allowing the American people to hear the facts for themselves.
So that's what happened, and those were the reasons for what happened. Now, what do we know about what this vote means? I'm going to tell you right now. 1, it moves this whole investigation into a public phase. Public interview transcripts, public hearings, public objections, public battles over what this president did and whether, if he did do something, that is a high crime. If the private depositions are any indication, this means a lot of damning evidence against Trump is coming. A lot of the bombshells, the corroborations, and the internal contradictions exposed in this White House, all of that under these rules that are now real will go public. What else do we know? Well, 2, today forced the politicians to reveal where they stand. House Republicans are now on record more united defending Donald Trump right now than the Democrats were when the same kind of authorizing vote was held against President Clinton. We can say that as a fact now tonight because today no Republicans crossed the aisle to back the impeachment probe. Compare that to over 30 Democrats who did the same to Clinton. We can also note that 2 Democrats crossed Pelosi to oppose this measure. What else do we know? Well, 3, today's vote exposes Donald Trump's objections and bluffing on stonewalling. And here's exactly how it does that. Take a look at how the White House responded to this vote, alleging the impeachment probe has, quote, violations of due process. That's false. Now, last night, there might have been a debate about that among some people because the rules were at that point a proposal. Tonight, I can tell you, I can report for you to the nation that's false because Congress passed these rules and they're transparent, so we can read them. And they include due process for President Trump. In fact, they include a lot of due process protections that even go beyond what other presidents have been afforded impeachment probes. The participation of the president and his counsel, which means they can present their case, object to evidence, object to testimony being included at the hearings. They can also cross-examine witnesses. The president has rights, and this Congress is saying they will be recognized. If impeached, he'll face a trial based on the evidence that this Congress gathers under these rules they passed today. Which is why today is not a drill. This is the real thing. Speaker Pelosi's measure defines the arena, the rules, and the referees, which makes some of the usual commentary and political tweets and complaints increasingly irrelevant because what matters is the new rules of the road and the evidence, which, of course, on the substantive issues has been piling up. It's been telling a story that Donald Trump abused his power to demand a foreign government help him win re-election and go after his rival, Joe Biden. It's been telling a story that Donald Trump seized money this Congress appropriated by law and then tried to exploit it in a plot for his re-election. Now, under the law, the president can't steal $391 million from the budget to get a Ukrainian Biden investigation any more than he can steal $391 million and park it over in a MAGA political action committee. If you're listening to me, you're probably hearing parts of this story are pretty straightforward. Everything I'm saying to you is plain English. There's no footnotes. This is part of the evidence that's piled up. What's new tonight is that now the Congress has guaranteed those pieces of evidence and these allegations will be put before the Congress and the country and will be judged. And that forces Washington and the nation to answer. Is it okay for the president to do that stuff? And if it's not okay, what is the Congress going to do about it? What is the remedy? This is history we're watching together. You can probably feel that on a night like tonight. This is history that is significant in part because it is rare and has very few echoes. There's one in 1868, if you go back then. There's 1998, of course, with Clinton. And then there's those dark days for Nixon in the 1970s. In fact, it was all the way back in 73 when a few high school-age musicians from Jamaica, Queens, appraised their divided country at the time. This was many months before it was clear that Nixon would ever be ousted. And they said in a song famous for that era, some people say that he's guilty. Some people say, I don't know. Some people say, give him a chance. Some people say, wait till he's convicted. I'm quoting, of course, the Honey Drippers, ladies and gentlemen, capturing the dueling arguments that face any nation looking at the regrettable question in those rare times in history when it is posed. The question, is the president a crook? I turn now to our experts on this panel, Juanita Tolliver from the Center for American Progress Action Fund, Margaret Carlson from the Daily Beast, and Julian Epstein, former chief Democratic counsel to the House Judiciary Committee. Juanita, I put the Honey Drippers question to you.
And honestly, the way you laid it out so succinctly is what the American public has been waiting for. They now get the opportunity to hear directly from the witnesses who have named names, who have stated dates, who have corroborated each other's stories, as well as the original statement from the whistleblower, which brought all this to fruition. The question of whether or not President Trump asked a foreign government to interfere in our elections, which he has already released in his own statements, which we've heard from witnesses, and now that's coming out into the public. And what's going to happen now is you're going to see these polls oscillating mightily. This information being laid out in full public display with full press coverage is going to turn some heads, and American public is going to expect to hear that repeated statement about everything that Trump has done to ask a foreign government to interfere in our elections.
Margaret?
Ari, are you ever going to sing the lyrics one of these nights, or have I missed the night
No.
when you actually sing?
No, I will never sing lyrics. In fact, that's my solemn promise to you, Margaret, and the audience.
Okay, we appreciate that.
But you
Ari.
remember that song, Impeach the President?
Yes, it's
73.
It's lovely, and your rendition without the music was just fine. So, Ari, on this today. These are more generous terms than have been given before in impeachments. There's nothing to impeach about these due process rules. What I don't like about what happened today is that it kind of concedes that what went before wasn't fair and wasn't due process. And it leaves out there with this word private hearings and secret hearings that there weren't practically half the room filled with Republicans, which was, deepened by the fact that they had the pizza stunt storming the room with people who would have actually been in the room had they been abiding by the terms that were set up. So we're not going from something secret to now something better. This is just part of a process, and it's always done that depositions are taken not with the cameras rolling. I mean, the only thing different about this, it seems to me, in general, was that the cameras weren't rolling. But there was nothing about it that the Republicans in the House couldn't find out about in a moment's notice. they don't want to know, because when they have to deal with the evidence, I think they're really going to be in a bad spot, because the quo of the quid is totally there, and it's totally in black and white, and it's totally by people who are in the White House and who were there. Like there's so many smoking guns. It's like there's the room. You need a mask to go into the room.
Yeah, and Julian Epstein, who was chief counsel for the Democrats on the Judiciary Committee, has been through these battles and the comparisons we mentioned. I wonder what you think about the significance of today and how it does line up, to Margaret's point, to the past that you were a part of.
Well, I just think, to correct Margaret for a second, I think you're more freestyling than you are singing. But I think, look, the rules that were adopted today were largely identical to the rules that were adopted in 1998. I will remind your viewers that in 1998, Bill Clinton cooperated with the grand jury. He testified before the grand jury.
Right.
And then when these rules were adopted, they were actually adopted in the committee by voice vote before an impeachment resolution went to the floor. And when we had to implement the rules, the chief counsel for the Republicans and I had to sit down with the White House counsel, Chuck Ruff. And Chuck Ruff said to both Tom Mooney, who was the chief counsel of the Republicans, and myself, that the White House intends to fully cooperate with this impeachment probe, even though they completely disagreed with it vehemently, and that if the committee ever on the judiciary ever didn't get anything short of full cooperation, that the two of us were to call him immediately, gave us his phone number, and said he would address it. So the White House was completely cooperative with the Congress at every step of the way. What I find so remarkable about this process here is how ill-prepared the Republicans are for this fight. Nancy Pelosi has completely played the Republicans. The Republicans have painted themselves into a corner on this process argument, and they did it for 2 or 3 weeks, and she gave them enough rope to kind of hang themselves. And then at the end of that, she's pulled the rug out from underneath them and said, okay, you want due process? We'll give you all the due process that prior presidents have had. And now they're left with very, very little to argue, other than a very weak substantive argument, which, from my conversations on the Hill with people who are talking to Republicans in both the House and in the Senate, Republicans, they haven't got to the point where they're ready to jump ship yet. But if the numbers change, the key thing that I think you want to keep in mind in terms of impeachment, it is always, always, always about that middle third of the electorate. Can you get the numbers from about 50% for impeachment to 60%? In the case of Clinton, it was always very low. It was always at about 30, 35%. But if the numbers move from 50%, where they are right now, to 60, 65%, I think you're going to see a lot of Republicans who privately have nothing but loathsome feelings for this president. I think you're going to see some of them start to break. But that's the question. Can the Democrats prosecute this case, and does the public in this age of constant digital distractions have the attention span to consider a linear narrative over many months about what looks like a very clear open and shut case of bribery?
Well, and as you put it, a case in bribery with rules now that provide for the public hearings, and then, yes, linear to the Senate if it goes there, Juanita, of people hearing the evidence. Now, your colleague Julian here made a reference to freestyling, which, of course, is making up the lyrics as you go along, which can be impressive when done well, but also can fail if you don't know what your next line is going to be. And so, to Julian's point, I want to play some of what we've heard from the Republicans, because while there are substantive arguments to be made, and we'll be covering them and hearing them, the freestyling of the strategy of, are you debating whether or not the facts happened? Are you saying the facts are okay? Are you saying the facts are not okay but not impeachable? We're hearing every type of freestyle defense thus far. Take a listen.
Democrats are trying to impeach the president because they are scared they cannot defeat him at the ballot box. How Soviet style this is running. This is the United States of America. Don't run a sham process, a tainted process.
Trying to put a ribbon on a sham process doesn't make it any less of a sham.
What we're seeing among Democrats on the Intelligence Committee down in the SCIF right now is like a cult. Now they've decided they don't like the way he talks to foreign leaders.
Juanita.
This is not an occasion to freestyle. This is an occasion when you need to come to reality and realize what these witnesses are saying. And this is mainly for the 47 Republicans in the room who have been a part of these testimonies and depositions, who hear from the witnesses and know that once this information goes public, their constituents are going to start asking questions. At what point are you going to stop trying to put your party first or cover for Trump over protecting our constitutional right to free and clear elections? At what point are you going to stand up for the oath of office that you took to preserve and protect our country against adversaries, foreign and domestic? And so it really comes down to the fact, when will Republicans put that oath of office above protecting President Trump?
And Margaret, Donald Trump is often credited for his approach to communications. It certainly generates attention and feelings, if not always facts or civility. Have you noticed that he has seemed increasingly MIA? I mean, the Congress just did something very big. I walked through why at the top of the show. And it is striking to see Donald Trump, this communicator, go a little quiet. And then substantively, beyond just the so-called communications of it, they have not, and as of this hour, we've been checking with the White House, they have not said whether they're going to do what, as Julian referred to, the Clinton White House did, and engage and send lawyers down and be in this process, or not.
I expect another diversionary tactic, like he's going to hold the signing of the China trade deal at some Trump property, as he did last week when he said that he was going to hold the G7 at the Doral. I mean, he's very good at doing that when he feels cornered, and he doesn't have, there's not much you can say except bring out the old witch hunt and the hoax. And Nancy Pelosi asked the question. I don't know, or she made this statement in today, I don't know what Republicans are afraid of. Well, they're afraid of the truth. They don't want to get to the facts. And to quote a movie, Ari, they can't handle the truth because the facts are so against them that they don't have a defense. It's not that they're not putting it out there and they don't have the message and there's no war room. The substance of it is it's just not there.
Colonel Jessup and A Few Good Men.
Yeah.
Julian?
There you go.
Well, so let me just point out again, I want to continue this notion, if we can, that you and Juanita talked about on the freestyling point. In 1998...
Continue the notion. Second that notion, as it were.
Yeah, I'll second that notion. Yeah, Aretha. So if we in 1998, the reason we won the debate was because we decided early, in January and February, when we knew we were going for impeachment towards the end of the year, what our strategy would be, what the offense would be. And we picked up on the prosecutorial excesses of Ken Starr. He withheld an attorney from Monica Lewinsky. He was sanctioned by the court repeatedly for grand jury leaks of material. He was overly obsessed with the sexual details of an extramarital affair. And we knew the public was on our side on these arguments, and we prosecuted them continuously for 12 months. And we won the argument. The reason that I think many Republicans are panicking privately is now that the process argument has been taken away from them, they are kind of freestyling in a way that's very discordant and inharmonious. And they're kind of making it up as they go along. And it's clear they just don't have a strategy. It's clear they don't have a way, to Margaret's point, about pushing back either on process, because that issue's gone now, or on substance, because you kind of caught Trump with his hand in the cookie jar in this bribery question. And so the reason that I think you're seeing people inside the White House come forward and testifying, we've had 2 White House officials come forward and basically affirm the bribery conspiracy, is because people are panicking that the evidence is, 1, strong, but 2, the White House has no idea what they are doing in terms of playing an offensive or defensive strategy.
Right, and they don't.
And people are very nervous about that.
And they don't seem to know the edge of what the provable facts are, which is never where you want to be if you're making a defense. Julian Epstein, Margaret Carlson,
or they're worried about what the edge of the provable facts are.
The edge. And Juanita Tolliver freestyling on Halloween night. My thanks to each of you. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.